Hey team, it's your favorite worst Immortal player here, back at it with a super brief look at what settings actually matter for competitive Valorant. Please note that this is just my opinion, but I'm good at the game despite being a terrible mechanical player, and I've done a fair amount of research in this space so that you don't have to. The idea is that you can just watch this short little video, jump through the timestamps, and then go on your merry way, after you subscribe and like and comment and follow and send me money, of course. Alright, let's crack into it. First up, settings that simply don't matter. Things I've heard about online and seen debated, but that I've found just honestly don't matter. Toggle versus hold. There may be some slight advantages to one over the other, but in the scheme of things, this really doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. The reason I say don't worry about it is because it's personal preference. It depends on how you play and what your other binds are. The theoretical advantage you may get from using hold versus toggle doesn't really outweigh any of the other trade-offs that you have to make to get there. Use either one, it doesn't really matter. I use toggle for what it's worth, and that's not to say that you should use it, it's to say don't worry about it. Next up, enemy highlight color. If I had a nickel for every time I saw a TikTok or YouTube video about color theory, of how your brain interprets reds versus yellows versus purples, well, I'd be rich, okay? It's all bullshit. Honestly, it's all just completely made up bullshit. I'm a designer in real life, and all of these YouTube videos are made up to get clicks and go viral. Just like I'm trying to do, but trust me, because I would never lie to you. This is just personal preference. It depends on what color your crosshairs are, what your monitor setup is like. Just use whichever one works for you and stop worrying about it. To show blood or not to show blood. This is another one I've seen videos about, but again, another one that doesn't really matter. I use blood showing because I like it. I find it easier to tell if I get a headshot or not, but that may just be because I'm used to that visual cue. I've tried both. I actually played all of beta without blood on because it was restricted in my region due to the lack of age rating. But when it became available, I switched to using blood, and now I have used that ever since. Again, personal preference. I've also started seeing a few videos about left-handed versus right-handed models, and this is a weird one. I've always used left-handed models since way back in Counter-Strike 1.6. There was no logical reason for it, I just like it. I'm not left-handed, but I switched one day about 10 years ago and I've used it ever since. Crazy to think that there's a specific advantage to one over the other. The only difference is that maybe, depending on the map you're playing or where you're playing, the specific angles that you may be holding may be more or less covered by your gun model, depending on which hand you're using. But that's getting pretty damn nitpicky, and I've never bothered to switch or think about that. I say, do what makes you happy on this one too. Alright, that's all the controversial ones out of the way. Now on to the settings that actually do matter. First up, your minimap. You want to make sure that you can see the entire minimap in your minimap view. I actually use rotate and keep player centered because my brain can just interpret what the fuck is going on in the minimap a little better with these things turned on. Everything kind of just lines up and makes sense when it's like this. But I make sure that my minimap size is maxed and my minimap zoom is low enough so that I can see the whole map in the minimap. The reasons should be obvious, but in case they're not, this is so that you can see what's happening across the map. Your minimap actually shows certain enemy abilities, like Reyna's Lair and Sova's recon darts. And it's really helpful to know what's happening on the opposite side of the map, so that you know if maybe someone is flanking you, or whether or not you should rotate. So get this one set up, more map equals more better. Next, show corpses on or off. I have played with both of these settings in the past, but I have turned corpses off definitively. There were times where dead bodies on the ground literally stopped me from seeing an enemy. And this happened too often, so I rage turned them off and I've never looked back. Turning this off just gives you more visibility and removes visual clutter from the game, which is always a good thing. The only caveat here is that if you're playing Sage, you need to be aware of what you're looking for to res someone. You're not looking for a body anymore, you're looking for one of these little coney icon things. Now, let's talk graphics. There is only really one graphics setting you need to keep on low, and that's detail quality. The game may look a little bit nicer with this turned on, but the game has far more visual clutter, specifically with agent abilities and specifically smokes. What this means is that you're less impacted by some smokes when you have your detail quality set to low. Specifically Viper's wall. There is an entire additional smoke effect running along the bottom of her wall when you have detail quality set to high. This can obscure your vision at times, so I would just recommend playing with it on low detail quality. I also recommend using low UI quality. This means that when you're in menus like settings or the buy menu, your game in the background isn't blurred, it stays crisp and visible. Just again, something that I would recommend because doing it gives you a small advantage with no real trade-off. Look, I typically play with all of my stats and graphs turned off because I don't like the clutter. But if you are one to get tilted about missing shots and you like to blame everything but your aim, well, I would recommend turning on client FPS graph, packet loss graph, and the shooting error graph. All of these would let you know why your shots may have missed. Maybe it was your system lagging, or maybe you were actually moving while you shot. And just make sure you use graph for this so that it shows over time and you can look back at what happened after you died. Finally, Nvidia Reflex low latency. I use this with boost plus on. From what I know, this is just a net positive setting to use. It reduces your input latency with no real downside. The only theoretical downside is if you have a really old PC that may suffer performance-wise from this, but I'm yet to see a case of that actually happening, and broadly recommend using it for the small advantage. Alright, that's it. That's my expert opinion on which settings to ignore and which settings to use. I hope this helps you. As always, reach out in the comments with any more advice you may have for our community, or to ask any questions to myself or the rest of the people here. Thanks, and I'll see you all again soon.